So I ask you to stand and welcome Reverend Rosalyn Bruyere.
How's that? Better? Great. I saw my topic. That could take me anywhere. You were very kind. I don't have to, perform on cue and deliver some paper, which I've done my whole career. I should let you know that this is pushing the 50th year of being a healer. I started in 1972. So, by my math, what does that make this? 46? Yeah? And that was just my professional beginning. And I had no intention of doing this. None. I was a housewife with 2 hyperactive children. I was a grocery checker. And my mother was so proud of that because I belonged to a union. Being a union member made my mother very happy. And you have no idea how upset she was that I left a good-paying union job to do this. Oh, my God. And how it started was I started doing this and realized finally I was doing this so much more than grocery checking that I really had to resign. And she was very upset. And she believed that I'd become a con artist, which is how she thought of my father's family. My father's family thought that I had become a religious fanatic, like my mother's side of the family. Years went by. We published in 1976 at UCLA, and both sides of the family knew that the gift came from their side. Go figure. Yeah? Well, the gift comes from all around you. It doesn't come from your family. And it comes to everybody who works their ass off. And you work your ass off sometimes by sitting perfectly still and receiving. It doesn't look like work to anybody but us, right? Your family say, oh, you're going off to one of those again, And they kind of punish you when you come home because they've missed you for 3 days and you've been off doing nothing. So you come in the door and there are lots of demands right away and they want you to, heal their owies because the only thing they want you for is to heal their owies. Because the rest of this is something they don't talk about where they're employed. So what I've found over many years of doing this is when I'm traveling and someone says, what do you do for a living? I tell them I'm a healthcare administrator. Never tell the person next to you on the plane what you do. Or this is a working flight. So nobody wants to know what healthcare administration is about. This is about as interesting as an insurance coder. It's like, you could say I was in accounting. I have to account for everybody's soul. So, as this went on, and the world's changed because of the internet. And one of the things that they bring me to conferences for now, and I know this, it's okay, I'm not offended by this. I'm to tell you what happened before the internet. It's my job to let you know that there were people doing this before the internet. And not everything made it to the internet. You know, nobody has the time to take those old studies and dump them on the internet, so they're hard to find sometimes. And somebody's always calling me to ask me if I have the Rolfe study, which was done in 1974. And by the way, yes, I do. And I have hard copies of the work I did at Menninger Clinic, and I've got paper. My house is full of paper. Is yours?
Yes.
Do you have trouble with the books also? Well, I mean, I have walls and walls and walls of books, and I've learned tricks. If you take 4 stacks of books, leaving the names and titles out in 4 directions, and you put them on a Lazy Susan, then you put a round thing on the top and put a tablecloth over it, you have a working end table. Appropriate for offices, dens. You have to put the tablecloth over, or somebody will pull a book out and the whole thing. So I'm aware of all kinds of tricks to hide books. I have them under beds. I have them, I have them everywhere. And I have them in categories. My healing room has just my Egyptian books in it, and it's, I think, 10 floor-to-ceiling bookcases. I mean, there's a lot of them, a lot of stuff in there. And so what happens over time, and I think I had a fantasy that I was going to rebuild the library at Alexandria that was burned by the Romans. And my coveting of all this information comes from a very specific place. When I began in the late 60s, early 70s, there was no information. And I lived in one of the few places there was any information, because apparently everybody who ever had a religious cult moved to California for the weather. They all self-published, and those books ended up at the Los Angeles Public Library. And there was a section of the library, in fact, this is the first room I've been in a long time that was as big as the section. There was a section as big as this of stacks of metaphysical books with its own card catalog. So I started there reading the 268 books on the human aura. And you know what I found out? That the aura was or was not a magnetic field. That it was a 1/2 inch, 6 inches, 12 inches, or infinite. That if your aura was blue, you were either deeply depressed or highly spiritual. There were no 2 books that agreed about anything. Pretty much there were 7 chakras, but there were books that had 16, 12, 5, like the Tibetans have 6, there were different systems. I found out that you had to have a bump on the head to see them. So I kind of went back, who hit me? I could never find anybody that hit me in the head, so that wasn't it. So how did this happen? Well, actually it happened because both sides of my family do have actually measurable gifts. My mother's side of the family, my great-grandmother, who I spent a lot of time with when I was a child, saw auras all the time. And she had a little bit of telepathy with various family members. And one day I was in the garden, and she just finished teaching me that if I rooted this, because it had an aura, if I put it in rooting soil, nothing would happen. This one had an aura. If I put it in, it would flourish. And I said, Nana, that's not true. And she said, do it. So she got me some dead soil and some living soil, and we did the experiment, right? So 10 minutes later, she said, I wonder what Mickey would like for dinner. That was her husband's name. And I said, well, why don't you call him? And she looked at me with this, in my family it's called the look. So and now I'm her age, so I can really do the look, right? So she looked at me with that look and said, I just did. And I realized that she'd reached out, and I did see something fly into her field, because I was in my little auric bubble. Well, unfortunately, my Nana had a nervous breakdown when Mickey died. And one of the reasons they thought she needed to be institutionalized was she was hearing voices and seeing lights around bodies. So in my 7-year-old mind, I thought we needed to shut this down right away before they locked me up also. And it would try to come back periodically. And then, life goes on, and by that time we were in the 60s. The last time we were in a war with Russia, by the way, right? And we had a very conservative director of education in California, and he shoved us all in math and science courses because we had to beat the Russians. So I ended up in electrical engineering, and I was very, very happy there. Well, I'm very happy in the sciences. Everything is fixed. There's none of this gray area in the sciences. And it was all easy grades, and so that's where I ended up. And then, like so many women in those days, I dropped out, got married, had babies. And my little brats, bless their hearts, at 3 and 4 developed not only a language of their own, but they started seeing what they called fuzz around bodies. And I didn't have to do anything about it at first. But there was a family dinner, and my mother was called in to work at an emergency, and as she got up and ran out the door, my youngest son said, "Mommy, Grandma's got orange fuzz all around her middle." And that night I was called. 2 in the morning, my mother had been hospitalized with a bleeding ulcer. And I went, oh shit, orange fuzz. Right? Okay, I gotta find out what this is, what it does. And once I was open to that idea, things kind of fall in your lap. You know how that happens. Most of you have these things just fall in your lap. And so I was kind of put on a path, and I was taken into a lovely spiritualist community that was the first people I met that actually knew anything about how to use the aura and what it meant. So I was trained to have some accuracy in seeing, and I was trained to do healing work, which is, for spiritualists, I don't know if you know this, but for spiritualists, the highest calling is healing. And it was the only thing I cared about. I don't care if you're going to marry a tall, dark, handsome stranger. I don't care. I don't care about lottery numbers. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they think if you're clairvoyant you should be interested in, and I'm just not. So I became the class healer, really, because I was one of the younger people in the class at that point. And a lot of miracles happened. Just wonderful, wonderful miracles happened, which I dismissed. I'm college educated after all. So I knew they had a psychosomatic illness and that their belief healed them. Didn't have anything to do with me. And that went on for about 3 or 4 years. And then I was suddenly with people that weren't predescribed to believe, and healing started happening. And that's when the whole world, my whole world, went kind of out of control, and I left grocery checking. But I still watch Grocery Checkers, and I can still bag better than any box boy you will ever meet. Which comes very in handy when you're packing suitcases. Because in suitcases, you put the soft stuff on the bottom to cushion the load. In grocery checking, the other way around, right? So the aura is packed the same way. Denser inside the body, less dense outside the body. And the biggest mistake that I see healers all over the world make is they keep trying to encounter the energy outside the body. Yeah? Don't encounter it out there. Get in the middle of a kidney and find out what it's doing. The energy in the kidney is more important than the auric field around the kidney. So you have to go in. There's depth involved in this. And the body's three-dimensional. It doesn't look anything like it does in a textbook. Even the stupid attempt I made in my book to show you how the chakras flow, people can't apparently take that off the page and put it on a three-dimensional form very well. So someday I'm going to have a body that has many layers that you can see the energies that go inside and outside. Most people don't even know that there's a redundancy in the body and that the chakras repeat themselves everywhere in the body. I'll give you the best example you'll never forget because you guys mentioned brain balancing. The cervical spine is numbered correctly. C1 goes to the first chakra, C2 to the second, because the energy comes up and it has to go back down, and that's the chakra system that spreads it back down in order. And I have friends, very close friends, who went through our whole program and are healers, but they're also professional people. A dentist friend of mine has worked in many institutions, and how she brain balances patients and works on their parts, she does it all from the chakras in the neck. Because she's a dentist, she's not allowed to touch below the neck. Her license won't cover her touching below the neck. So she just brain balances the cervical spaces. That's where most of the energy flows, is in the space. There are some cases where you want to go right into the bone. But that repetition, in case you didn't notice, I'm sure you noticed it on a foot reflexology chart. Your heel is the first chakra, your toes are the upper chakras, right? 6 and 7. So you've got these repetitious places, the palm of your hand, all these places. Would you all mind if I sat down? Okay. I reach a point where it gets wobbly. Don't worry about me. This is what happens if you don't take good enough care of yourself as a healer, because it's a high-stress job. Don't you guys teach unstressing? Absolutely. Do you ever do it? Between 12 and 2, maybe? a.m.? Most of us, at some point in our, and I'm that point now, I'm dealing with all the genetic stuff that was in my family. I just got it 10 years after everyone in my family did, so I've been dealing with some health issues. And I've had the best time. I got into a program at Huntington Hospital, close to where I live, in Pasadena, and I got to see all of the holistic health that I have fought so hard for in the program I was in, and how available it was. So I was diagnosed a few years ago and was treated for breast cancer. And that division had its own acupuncturist, its own massage therapist, its own meditation director. You could have hypnosis if you wanted. You could have herbalism. And I was in the acupuncture study that they run for lymphedema, for post-breast cancer conditions. I mean, and I could have anything else. I had nutrition, I had everything that we have fought for. And that's where I found it. It's not that widespread in the rest of the hospital, but in cancer, it's now becoming very much universal. And one of my students now works in the generalized hospital at Huntington as a touch therapist. Yeah? Because it's not a problem, really. You can talk about this almost everywhere. I mean, you do get the blank look, and you also get the people that say, "Oh, do you do Reiki?" And I smile. I go, "Yeah, I do Reiki." And I had a little trouble with my husband as I went through this, because they would come in and they would explain to us all the things we had available to us, and they would explain over and over again to me what holistic healing was. And and I would smile. One day my husband lost it and said, "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" I went, "Honey, shh. Doesn't matter who. They have to give me the information. They're doing their job. Just shh." So one of the things I want you to know is that whatever they call what we're doing, most people in America have heard the terms before. They have no idea what it is, and they have no idea what it does. So I thought this morning that the most important message I could give you was for you to know what it does. Some of you made the mistake of calling in the light without realizing it was going to change your life. Your aura is your mind, it's your emotions, it's your physicality, it's every part of your being. The aura is the organizing factor for the width of what a human being can be. It covers it all. And when you start pouring light into the darkened places in you, they surface. Now, I was lucky because the spiritualists told me that early. They called it chemicalization. Because what happens is you get filled with all this love and light, and all the bitchiness you stored ends up on your tongue somehow. So that you can use everyone you know for dialysis to get this out of your system. And they simply said, oh, you're chemicalizing. They called it chemicalization. And that term goes back to the early theosophists, the beginning of the last century. So I kind of was prepared, but I see all these people that come from the sciences, as most of you did, and you end up in this work and you have no idea it's going to change your emotions. Things you cared about, you're never going to care about again. Things you never cared about, you're suddenly going to care about. It hits your mind. Some days it makes you addled. Some days it makes you brilliant. Just depends upon which frequency you happen to be running. And the aura is the only thing that it can explain to you, really, how you stored all that stuff. What happens to you in life is you live through a series of very traumatic experiences. And it doesn't matter what part of society you grow up in. Life is hard. It's supposed to be. And when you come across things in your life that you can't process, you tuck it in your tissue. That's why we say the issue's in the tissue. So here we are, helping somebody. Their issues come out. We talk to them. We comfort them. We fluff them up. We pain drain them. I mean, when we were making, this is a funny story. We were making the movie Resurrection many years ago, and the cinematographer noticed that if I gave Ellen Burstyn a treatment before her close-ups, she didn't have wrinkles. So if I was on the set, they'd send a gopher for me who would come out and say, could you come and fluff Miss Burstyn's aura? And I did. I mean, fine. I can fluff her aura. That's not a problem. I never thought of that as a cosmetic use for this, but since then I've had a lot of plastic surgeons ask if I would work in their office and if I could stand the atmosphere in a beauty salon, which I can't, I would be able to stand it in a plastic surgery office. Talk about the world's shallowest people, right? No, I'm serious. And I was young and stupid and idealistic and I didn't get it. So I did, early in my career, I did a study on third-degree burn patients. And I was working with the head of that department in this hospital, and we were having lunch one day, and he was known. I mean, he's so known that even today they call the nose job he did after his name. It's called the Grossman nose. And I can recognize it anywhere in the world because I've seen so many of them. They're pert. Let's just say they're pert. It's Hollywood. What can I tell you? So, or Holly Weird, probably some of you call it. We try not to. We're supposed to represent the Chamber of Commerce. So, so we're over lunch, and I said to him, Dick, I don't understand. You have this wonderful cosmetic practice. Then you do this over here where you're saving lives. I mean, they would ship burnt children from all over South America and Mexico to this one unit for him to save. And he did. I mean, it was brilliant to watch what he could do. He said, I don't get it. And he looked at me kind of and said, Rosalyn, beautiful women. I went, what? He said, this is hard work over here, the burns. My antidote to that is beautiful women who all adore me. You know, you feel really stupid when you don't get something like that, and you go, oh, of course. I mean, grow up, Rosalyn. I'm still saying that. I'm 72 and I'm still saying grow up, Rosalyn. So when I talk to you about the soul issues, you tucked yours away too. The difference is you're willfully bringing the light through you, and they're going to come up. They're going to come up. The light is supposed to transform you. That's what it does. But you're not sitting there like a yogi in a cave somewhere meditating till enlightenment. You're working the light every day of your life. You're working it, and it's working you. Healers, all healers, have to take care of themselves, and they have to train. Healing is physical. It's not just spiritual. It's not lightweight. It's not unprofound. When I tell you you have to reach into a kidney, you're doing surgery. There's just no bloodletting. But there's certainly blood moving. No matter where you put your hand on a body, you increase capillary dilation. We prove that in the lab over and over again. So you're moving circulation every time your hand touches. And the amount you run is how much of the body you dilate. So I train my students to sit across from each other and run energy up the arm and stop. When I shake somebody's hand, what's in their heart is none of my business. So I don't run up into their heart. I intentionally tuck myself and shake their hand like any polite person should. Yeah? But I can tell whether they're pulling from me or pushing at me, because my arms are really sensitive to giving and receiving. And I have to know how far I'm going. How am I going to hit a heart valve if I can't find it? I have to hit a heart valve. I have to hit a cataract. I have to hit a brain tumor. I have to hit a patella. There's no part of the body that I don't have to be specific with. I can run and circulate the energy and trust the energy to do what I don't know how to do. There are so many areas I don't know anything about. So every patient is a new universe I enter. But I don't enter not knowing that that person's going to change me. I hold their soul in my hands for an hour at a time. You can't deeply encounter a soul and not have your soul be moved. I mean, if you even could, it wouldn't be fair, right? The universe is fair in all the places I don't care about, and it's not fair in any of the places I want it to be, right? Isn't that true? I want all kinds of things to be fair that aren't fair. But the fairness is, when you touch a soul, it touches you. I want to do a little exercise with you. You only have to do this with one person, but you can do it in a group. I want you to put your hand this way, and I want the person next to you to put their hand on top of it. I don't care which hand. I just want you touching. Touching, skin to skin. None of this fluffy stuff. All right. Can you feel the place where their hand is touching yours? Okay. Can you feel the place where you're touching them? It is not the same place. One is pushing, one is receiving. Okay, as long as you're there, push your energy a 1/4 inch into that hand. Can you feel where you're touching inside them? Can you feel where they're touching inside you? You can break away. Not that you want to. You just made soul contact. You just made soul contact. You touched their soul. You went in. And they went in. I'm a real pastor. I can marry you now if you'd like. Thank God nobody let us do that in high school, right? Oh my God. I just sent my youngest granddaughter to college. And I'm thinking, oh, here it comes. You know, we got her through high school, but now comes college and dorm life. This is where you encounter souls from other cultures. Right? This is where you get all your scrambling in a way that you weren't scrambled before. I mean, it starts when you go to school. But once you've left the confines of the unit and interact with other units, you start that soul mixing. And their soul touches yours and yours touches theirs. And because your mind is the aura, you get unconscious downloads of what other people think. And once you put people in a group, and a group is anything 2+, right? And you start to mingle those auras, the thoughts start going back and forth. So we would all like to think that we're independent thinkers, but people are thinking through you all the time. And we live in a very well advertised world where they're trying to think through you as much as possible, and can, you know. We're Americans, so we're pretty sophisticated about advertising, and we don't pay a lot of attention to it unless it's funny. Yeah, they finally learned that. They now make advertising funny. This is a lesson for us. Make healing funny. Make it fun and funny. The people we work with have seen tragedy. They haven't always seen comedy. And good comedy is very, very healing. So make fun of yourself, make fun of the day, make fun of the weather, make fun of your pets. Use every comic device you know, and don't forget the train wreck. People that are studied comedians who go to school for this have theories of comedy, and one of the great comedic theories is called the train wreck. You develop a train of thought and then you wreck it. So you develop a train of, in my case, usually sincerity, and I mean it, and they're getting uncomfortable because I'm too close to their soul, and I wreck it. I tell a joke. Because I can feel the level of intimacy that they can take. You don't need to push them past that. For heaven's sakes, you're already inside their body. I mean, come on. Come on, I won't tell any lewd jokes today because it's Sunday. Well, yeah, you should probably know I can't be trusted. My sons will rap me out about this. They say, Mom, the only time you swear is in public. You never swear at home. Why is that? I said, I never need to swear at home. I never need the train wreck at home. Because any sexual comment will train wreck what you're doing. So it's only a device for me. I know better than to form my thoughts in coarseness while my whole soul is trying to become refined. I was in the car with my husband the other day. We've been together more than 30 years. And he said, honey, you don't swear in the car when you drive. I said, no, honey, I don't. I haven't for a long time. He said, why did you do that? And I said, look, first of all, I'm driving on the LA freeways. They don't need any more thought pollution out here. I mean, we have 6 lanes going in one direction, or when it all stops, we call that valet parking. And when I come to other places and I have to drive, I'm very cautious because people have different driving styles across our country, and never mind the people who come from other countries, the way they drive. So, the first thing that people notice when you come to LA is you don't honk. And people are surprised because there's a lot of reason to honk in the traffic in LA. It's a state law. It's in our driving code. You don't honk unless you need to. Because otherwise, how would you know that it's a honkable thing? So that law's been on our books since the 1920s, as far as I understand. I mean, it's been there forever. And so it's a quiet city, and everybody goes, well, what's wrong here? It's really busy, but it doesn't, we don't honk. We're not honkies. Maybe. But there's a lot to learn by driving in that kind of a circumstance, because if you're a native Californian, and I am, we drive like this. We're paying attention to flow. If I drive in Boston, I have to get used to somebody on my bumper intentionally pushing me forward with their mind, right? You have the same thing that goes on in hospitals. There are people pushing you in and trying to push you out all day. When you're in a hospital, somebody's trying to get you to hurry up so they can do their procedure, get out of the way, move, etc. So I developed it early because I had small children when I first started healing. I developed a way to go on healing no matter what the interruption was. And my first important healing, the one that said, uh-oh, I'm a healer now, was my next door neighbor who had horrible eczema. And she taught painting by holding a paintbrush and pointing to things because she couldn't paint when the eczema took over. So one day I said to her, we have this little class that meets here on Thursday night. Do you want me to do one of the things we do? It might help that. I don't know. I don't really know what you have. So I lit a little candle on my coffee table, and we sat, and I held her hands, and I was just running energy in a ring. You guys have done this exercise in some class somewhere, right? Where you just hold hands and run in a ring. And I did that, and it started pulsing. And I realized our heartbeats had gone into sync because the energy was going bump, 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 bump. I went, okay, I guess this is a good flow. We did that for not more than 4 minutes when my youngest came in and said, Mom, can I have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? So I said to my friend, we'll do this again sometime when the children are napping, right? The next day she called me. She was eczema-free. I mean, it was gone. I went, wow, uh-oh, this is outside the world. I have to pay attention now. Well, I barely had time to pay attention because she went back to her art class the next day, and that afternoon 4 art students called me. And I had to tell them all, I don't know what this is, I don't know what it does, but I was young. No would never have crossed my lips, right? I said yes to everyone who needed anything. I should have been a nurse, right? Same mindset. I understand. You guys all know that without codependency, there would be no medicine. So when people say you're so codependent, I just go, yeah, it's a professional hazard. I don't mess with that. So one by one, and this is how the energy works. Everyone I touched for the first 3 months was healed. And then I got hard cases. Really hard cases. And they're the ones that taught me how to heal. Because they would get a tiny bit better and come back a week later, and a tiny bit more better, and they would come back. And I always like to tell the story of the man who really taught me what a healing session should be like. He was a high-powered contractor in LA, built high-rises and highways and all that stuff, and he was used to bossing unions around and stuff. So he came into my house in a wheelchair with very advanced ankylosing spondylitis, which I had no idea what it was at the time. He said, young woman, what is it you think you do? So I explained to him what the aura was, and it was a few inches on the outside of your body, and that I would scan the aura, I would find places where there were holes, and I would lay my hands there. So he was basically a bright red pain box. So I laid hands on all those areas. And then I went and worked on this big hole he had in his kidneys. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, I told you, I went over the whole thing again. There's an aura and blah, 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 blah. And he said, but I didn't tell you about my kidney. And I said, no, there's a hole in your aura. And this went on week after week. One day his wife looked at me and said, you two should be married. And it was true. He loved combat with me. And over time, I kind of liked it too. I'm a trained debater. I have no trouble with that. That's fine. Well, at 6 months, he came in and threw his cane at me and said, give this to some cripple. My doctor said I spontaneously remissed. So I now know what a spontaneous remission is. It takes 6.5 months. Reasonable combat. But he taught me that the more I engaged with him, the more I got in. Because the more he was out here challenging me, the more he was open in there. So he would come out and I would sneak in, and he would come out and I would sneak in. And sometimes he would come out and I would go back at him. Again, I'm going in. So over time, I took somebody who, if you guys are into the psychological part, yes, the guy was rigid and controlling. ... could match ankylosing spondylitis. I'm not a big proponent of disease having their own psychological stances because it's too narrow a theory for what we experience. And it doesn't do any good. It wastes energy to pursue that with a sick person. If it did more good, I would be fine with it. If somebody needs that kind of help, I have a Rolodex full of really great therapists, and that's where I send them. People that can diagnose, go deep, have experience in that field. I'm a great pastoral counselor. I know that. I don't particularly like it, but I'm good at it. Because I do marriage counseling for everyone I've ever married. I took a vow. I tell them before I marry them that I'm available. So if you ever become a pastor, don't tell them you're available. But I am, because I care about their condition, their soul, the hardest thing for any of us is to learn forgiveness. Yeah? And it's very, very easy to give a shallow forgiveness to our clients. Easy. For ourselves, we seldom give ourselves even the shallow forgiveness. We're pretty hard on ourselves. Pretty hard. And you have to ask yourself, when you're being hard on yourself, does this improve you and make you take action, or does it just make you feel bad? I've spent a lot of my career around religious people, and my husband is a rabbinical scholar. So I learned in his family that if you ever want to see somebody behave in a mean way, you're dealing with someone who's guilty or believes they are. Guilt makes people mean. Doesn't make you kind. You feel guilty about something that you may or may not have been able to control. It makes you mean that you couldn't control it, that you couldn't fix it, that you could, And you can't, by the way. Can you do everything? No. Can you do something? Yes. So the question you have to ask is, am I making it better? Well, when I'm the client, am I making me better? By not forgiving myself? I wasn't raised Catholic, but I do get the principle of just do the penance and get on with it. Just, if the penance is I have to throw out 3 pair of shoes. Aren't the rest of you guys shoe hoarders? Okay, now I've self-exposed twice. I'm a book hoarder and a shoe hoarder. We don't want to talk about crafts. Because I'm a craft hoarder too. So the next thing I want to, do I have time for this? Oh, I have plenty of time. 2 minutes. I want to talk to you about your hands. I'm going to talk to you about your hands. I have spent 47 years with people taking pictures of my hands. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've had good hands all of my life. My hands were trained early to garden, to sew, to crochet, to you name it. There is no craft at Michael's I haven't already done. And I had a teacher when I was younger. Every time he taught a prosperity course, we were to take up a new craft. And I was running out of them. I was running out of crafts to take up at that point. But every member of my family has one of those stupid macrame plant hangers. And most of my friends. So, your hands are your gateway to the world. And one of my beloved friends and mentors was the late Emily Conrad. And Emily started something in the dance therapy world that nobody had done before her. She called it Continuum. And she got her body to move like this. The only other place I've ever seen that is in Hawaiian Dance. It takes exposure to water for you to understand the flow. And this is how you go in. There is no straight line in energy. The energy comes down your arms like this. And then it gets out to your fingertips where it spins and spins and spins. And then this little chakra at the tip is your either laser or your suction cup, but however you're using it. It's where you go in and where you come out. What you do with your hands is introduce all of this to them. Not just elbow to hand. You have to heal with your whole body. To do that, you have to train your whole body. Every step you take, your body is designed to pull energy up and distribute it out through the crown. Because of the way we work in the modern age, a lot of people take in everybody else's energy and take it out. Because they're so ungrounded, they don't even have legs. When I'm in a major city and I watch people going down the street, they have an aura from their diaphragm up and it's yellow. And a lot of times it's on one side only, so half their head is sticking out. Their legs are sticking out. Because they don't use these other chakras that are part of what, to amp up power, you have to use all of this and squeeze it down the way you do with a hose in your garden. You put the cleaner nozzle on and go, because you might have to ream out a nerve, you might have to ream out a blood vessel, you might have to dissolve a cataract. And there are things that are going on in healing, and this is why I'm devoted to the science of it so much and have spent, a third of my life has been doing science for our field. There's so much that I know is going on that I can't prove. When you lay your hands on a tumor and you feel it melt, what's actually happening? A tumor isn't just cancer cells. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in there that isn't yet cancerous. And when you hit it with healing energy, that cell de-differentiates and re-differentiates as a normal cell. So when you're feeling a tumor shrink under your hands, what you're feeling is the other cells going, okay, I forgot, sorry. I just got caught up in this rebellion. So all the cells that haven't gone past 57 replications, according to Stanford research, are not cancerous yet. So at 56, they're still remakeable. At 57, you kill the sucker. And you kill it cleanly like you were a hunter. You blow it up. Just goodbye. Now, I can't tell you how much trouble I've had in my career because I say sometimes you have to kill the sucker. And I'm very lucky. My husband is a 7th degree martial artist, which is how we met. I was in his martial arts course, which I was told to do by my guidance when I was 20, so I finally did at 40. So, slow learner. I claim the 5th, but I'm a slow learner. And it was so interesting to realize that I'd been in our field for so long. I don't have any trouble killing cancer cells. That was never a problem for me. But I didn't have any healthy boundaries either. And what karate taught me was stop something before it goes bad. So in us, in our bodies, when we're working, we have to do something that feeds us all the time. Daily, you have to feed yourself. I'm not saying you can't party. I heard you guys last night. Because my suite is near the elevator. So every gaggle of you that finally left and worked your way up. Was the music good? It must have been, because you were still singing in the hall. It was fun. None of that stuff bothered me. Remember, I grew up in a noisy family, so it's all fine. It's all good. And I didn't think I was in the hotel by myself. But when you think about who your first patient is, remember to be among those you serve. The healer has to be among the people they serve. You do have to serve yourself. Some of you do that first and then take care of others. I take care of others, which is how I learned to take care of myself. I'm extremely externally motivated. I will do a lot more for my family than I'll do for myself. But in the process of doing that, I've learned to say, oh, it would be nice, somebody should do that for me. Which, if I had simply said, thanks, they would have. How many times a day do people offer you help and you say no thank you? Break that habit sooner than later. So all of that is your aura. The great Wilder Penfield, the Canadian neurosurgeon, in his very last paper before he passed away, said that after all the open brain surgeries he'd done, over 3,000, he never could conclude that the mind was in the brain. Wow. The mind is a field that goes through the brain. So the mind isn't in your brain, which is how you can get a brain injury and then have another part of your brain take back the information you lost. If you're constantly growing your brain, which handwork helps, by the way, so does learning languages, and it's a whole bunch of stuff we now know we can do. If you're growing your brain, you're not losing your mind. But some of us are of an age, are we not? Where you can't remember your best friend's name, but you can remember your second grade school teacher's name. Isn't that fun? Let me introduce you. Could you introduce yourself to my... But you do remember things from way long ago. So, in summing up, I want you to know where we are now. We're no longer a secret. Because of the internet, there are no secrets. You can Google anybody in this room and get information about them that they don't want you to have. But what you can get on the internet is information you're looking for if you use it the way you would use a library. Go to the section, don't go to the site. Feel your way into everything that's being done in the world. A lot of my students in Germany are now doing university research in our field. I think there are 3 of them at this point. People who went through our program, and long story, I was teaching in Germany for 25 years. They're at university level, so they're doing research in Vienna, Munich, and Frankfurt. And what they're showing or demonstrating is the value we add to the healing process of medicine. We are the value add for modern medicine. We can make drugs smarter, so people can take the drug they need without the side effects. We can make surgery successful. We can stimulate healing post-surgery. We can comfort people, particularly bedside. One of us shows up and the world changes. When my husband and I go into children's hospitals, of course, they just think the grandparents are here. And one of our babies, kidney transplant patient at Children's in Chicago, when asked, because they were doing a little blurb about us, so they took the tapes out, were recording people, she said, "I don't know what they did to me." Well, I know what we were trying to do. We were trying to keep her from rejecting the kidney post-transplant. She said, "I just know that they touched my heart." Just 7 years old. They touched my heart. Thank God. Yeah? Thank God on a good day, a healer touches a heart that till we got there felt like they were going through suffering by themselves. If you can get in, mingle with their soul, they're no longer alone in the hard places in their life. And healing from serious disease is a hard place for most people, a very hard place. And for us, it's our honor to serve. Yeah? Okay, I'm going to honor your schedule. Would you mind if I prayed for you? I used to know how to do this on a Sunday. Still do. Will you bow your heads? Grandmother, grandfather, power of the 4 directions, all of my ancestors, I send a voice. We are in a difficult time here in our nation. We have many questions about how we should be perceived and how we perceive others. There's great strife in our country and, in fact, in the whole world. And you sent this pocket full of healers to touch the souls of others. I ask that you bring them the peace to do so, the courage to stand up and help, and the mystical gift that only you can bring us of knowing that our souls are growing and that there's no final graduation, only you by our side, guiding us step by step. I ask that you show us the task, give us the tools to enact the task, and that the dog soldiers be at our back to protect the sick while we do our work. I ask it in the name of the Mother Earth, the Father Sky, and all the deities that help us. Aho. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I so appreciate you.